Before we get started, I just want to quickly say, if you guys have an issue with me being a part of these reactions, then please just go watch the original video. You don't have to watch me reacting to it. I've seen a lot of comments now where people are genuinely annoyed because I'm showing more of me and less of the video I'm watching on my screen. That's fine, you can have an issue with that, but in reality, if you want to just watch this video without me interrupting, go watch the original video. I've seen a couple of comments now where people are just genuinely getting annoyed by me when the channel is called JCARTSARTS. Like, yes, the video obviously that I'm reacting to is very important to what I'm doing, but I like to be myself and state my opinion about videos as they're going and after they're done. So I don't necessarily understand why you're coming at me like I'm the problem here. If you want to watch the original video without any interruptions or any issues like that, then just go watch the original video. It's as simple as that. So if you do like my opinions and you do like my reactions, then please continue your support. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel for new channels, share the content. It does mean a lot. If you want to go even farther, we have a Patreon page. I really do appreciate it. We're going to be watching the Oprah Winfrey interview of, I think this is Lionel. I can't really necessarily remember. So I don't know if this is an interview or not, but it is something to do with Oprah. So I was like, all right, fine, let's just go ahead and watch it. I haven't really watched a lot of Oprah. I was never a big Oprah fan back in the day. I was too young to even really be into the show. I think my mom was into the show for quite a while, but
I'm holding in my hand a photo of a little boy who may not look too different from your own child, but somewhere deep inside this innocent-looking toddler was the makings of a sadistic monster just waiting to come out. How could this little boy ever grow up to commit these humanly unimaginable and heinous crimes? He savagely raped and murdered at least 17 boys and men. He would then lure them into his home, drug and strangle them, then have sex with their dead corpses. Afterward, he would slowly and methodically skin and dismember their body parts, and finally would perform cannibalism on their mutilated flesh. When
wow,
we hear
dark.
about such
Yeah.
grisly crimes like this, a lot of us ask ourselves, who were his parents? I know I did. How was he raised? What happened to the child? This is the father of the young man who committed those crimes.
Okay, so
He's the
Lionel,
father of
isn't it?
Jeffrey Dahmer, Lionel Dahmer. Today, we're talking with parents who all somehow, some way, raised violent sex offenders, child molesters, rapists. And we're asking, what goes wrong from the time a child is born to the time they are savagely raping or molesting somebody else's child? That's what we're here.
Gosh, back then there was no filter. There was just no filter on TV. These are words people like are terrified to say on like social media anywhere. Most of the time they'll actually like bleep out the R word. She did one hell of a opening for that. That was fucking dark. How does a little boy, grow up to be such a sadistic and evil person? And well,
To try and figure out today so that other parents can stop this from happening to your own children, so that you might notice the signs and be able to do something before it's too late.
it's important, yeah.
Did you notice the signs, Mr. Dahmer?
No, the only signs that I saw were shyness and reluctance to engage in social interactions, that sort of thing, but no, really no overt signs of any kind.
One of the things you wrote in the book called A Father's Story, when you're trying to account for how this happened to your son and to your family, one of the things that you say, though, is that this same sense of something dark and shadowy, of a malicious force growing in my son, now colors almost every memory I have of his childhood. In a sense, his childhood no longer exists. So that when you look back on little things, things that you thought were little things at the time, somehow seem to foreshadow this monster that was created over the years.
Yeah, it's a sort of a retrospect sort of thinking now. When I look back on things like the time I was at Iowa State University in university housing, and I went underneath the house to clear it out of
Found some
trash
animals.
and debris.
And he was 4 years old at
He
the
was
time.
about 4 years old, yeah. And
Because you smell something under the house.
yeah, civet cats. It's a member of the skunk family, and I wanted to go underneath and fix it up so they wouldn't get in again. And I found cans and bottles and bones of mammals that the civet cats, the skunks, had eaten. And so I cleared all of this debris up, including the bones, and put it into a metal pail. And Jeff was there, and my former wife was there, and it was just an ordinary operation at the time, just a cleanup operation.
So you gone under the house and you found that these little skunk-like creatures had eaten a lot of the rodents.
Yeah, and left bones.
And left the bones. So you pull the bones out from under the house, and your wife at the time and Jeffrey Dahmer, 4 years old, they're standing out, and he started to go through the pail of bones. He was just 4 years old.
Right.
Correct?
We were just discussing, my former wife and I, what I was doing, and I looked down and I saw Jeff
Playing with the bones.
picking up the bones and dropping them back into the pail. And that was really the only time that I saw
Did he
any...
seem fascinated?
He didn't really seem overly fascinated, just sort of amused that they sort of dropped down and clanked and, you know, made a clanking noise.
He called them fiddlesticks.
And he said it's sort of like fiddlesticks, you know, these old pickup sticks that you used to play as a kid. And that was his name for pickup sticks. And he just seemed amused, and I wouldn't say overly fascinated or taken with it, but yeah. But in retrospect, looking back now, like you say, everything is sort of colored with memories like that.
Are there other memories?
The time that he had a double hernia operation, when he, you know, wondered whether he had his penis cut off, when he actually just had a double hernia operation.
How old was
He
he
was concerned about that. About the same age range, about 4 years old.
He was sick a lot, was he not?
He was very sick with ear and nose infections, and he would get injections at the local hospital.
So when you look back to times where I think in the same age range, because we now know your personality is formed by the time you're 6 years old, so whatever's there is there.
Generally,
you show me a boy at 6, we'll show you a man at 36, some people have said. So when the time he was walking through the house and asked you or your wife, what would happen if my navel was cut out?
I had a habit of recording him as a child. Just, you know, the old type, reel tape, just miles and miles of it. And I had that transcribed about 1.5 years ago to regular cassette tape. And I came across this one portion where he asked me, Dad, what would happen? We were just engaged in conversation about his body. And he said, what would happen if we cut out my navel? And I can remember just passing it off at the time, and it was maybe just an innocent question.
That's one of those things kids say.
But now, looking back, it's just one of those things that kids say out of interest.
Yeah. You say in your book, Lionel, you say, I've come to believe that some of the compulsions that overwhelm my son may have had their origins in me. That must be a frightening realization.
It was one of the items that
I feel like it would be hard to not compare yourself to your son, right? There'd be some things, like, especially where, you know, he probably, I know for a fact, you know, Lionel probably thinks all the time about, like, he was probably responsible in a lot of ways for Jeffrey turning into what he became. And I feel like it would be very easy, you know, because your son is a little bit like you 50% you, right? So, like, there's gonna be those moments where you're like, I used to think like that. I used to do things like that. I never would have thought, you know, he would have been interested in things like that. Like, and I didn't know it was going to develop in the way it has. Like, I feel like those are real. I kind of feel bad. I really do feel bad for Lionel. I really do. This is not something I would wish on anybody to have to deal with and ever have to go through in their entire lives.
Wanted to investigate. Being a scientist, I want to throw out everything for
You're a scientist and a chemist.
Yes, right. And there are a number of things. Did he turn out? Most people want to know why this happened.
Yeah.
Number one.
Immediately, we all thought, when we heard these heinous, horrible stories, we thought, who abused him? Did you abuse him? Was he abused? Was he sexually molested? Was he beaten as a child?
Those were the first thoughts that came to your mind.
Yeah.
Probably. I considered all kinds of things. Was it environmental, genetic? Was it perhaps medications that were taken at the time of, in the first trimester? Was it the effect of,
the hernia,
popular subject now, media violence? And was it genetic? These are all things to consider.
Was he molested?
No, he wasn't molested.
Was he physically abused in the home?
No, he was not physically abused. No.
So when you analyze, and you have a very analytical mind, that's what you do for a living. When you
Yes,
go
that's right.
back,
That's my
and
training.
yes, and when you go back, and the reason you say you've written the story is to try to make some sense of it.
Right.
As you analyze and go back over the years, trying to figure out how this could have happened, what have you concluded?
I've concluded that there are many more questions. I've answered some of the questions in my own mind,
Like
but
what?
very few.
Like
There's
what?
there's more questions that have been raised than have been answered. Well, I really do feel, I don't have really a lot of scientific evidence for this, but I feel, and this is a message that I wanted to convey to parents, that I feel that if a youngster, um, especially a male youngster, comes through his puberty and keeps everything in, bottles everything up inside himself, without talking to peers or family or friends, anyone at all, about their fears and angers and frustrations. I feel very strongly that it's possible that their uh, all of those fears
Or
and
signs of
anger can
trouble?
get mixed up
Yeah.
with the sexual awakening, such that they don't even understand
What's
what's
going on?
going on.
What's
Right.
interesting, though, about Jeffrey Dahmer,
It's
your
interesting.
son,
It's an
is that
interesting theory.
not these signs, according to what you've written here, didn't show up after, or during puberty. As you
That's
record,
right.
his first grade teacher noticed, or had said to you when you went to the school to talk to her, that he was a distant child, he didn't associate with the other children, that she had seen him on the playground,
Very shy.
pacing back and forth,
Just doing nothing.
doing absolutely nothing. He was not communicative. He didn't wish to associate with the other children, performed his tasks, but did them with absolutely no interest.
Right.
I'm sure that there are a lot of parents who are listening who say, well, that could be my child. So does that mean your child can turn out to be Jeffrey Dahmer?
There's millions of people who are shy. I was
Yeah, I was
definitely
shy.
shy and
And so
feeling inferior.
you felt
So
that some of the signs that he had, well, you had experienced that too.
I
You were
was
shy.
empathetic, right?
Yes.
And I gave variance to that to some degree. I felt that I understood that.
Yeah, because he was just a shy kid.
Right.
But he was more than shy. He was fear-stricken.
There was something developing in his mind that so bizarre that we just cannot imagine. Now, the
We'll never
difference
probably
there, I
know.
think, is
Why?
that he did not have any reality contact checks, with people. I think that it's really incumbent upon parents to check to see if their kids are talking to anyone about their fears.
You opened this book saying, if the police had told me that my son was dead, I would have thought differently about him. If they told me that a strange man had lured him to a seedy apartment and a few minutes later drugged, strangled, and sexually assaulted and mutilated his dead body. If they told me the same horrible things that they had to tell so many other fathers and mothers in July of 1991, then I would have done what they have done. I would have mourned my son and demanded that the man who killed him be profoundly punished. But I wasn't told what these other mothers and fathers were told, that their sons were dead at the hands of a murderer. Instead, I was told that my son was the one who had murdered their sons. I want, when we come back, to go back to the day when you had to be told that your son had done these horrible things.
Not an
I'm
easy
talking
day, I'm
with
sure.
Lionel Dahmer.
Horrible.
Lionel Dahmer is the father of Jeffrey Dahmer, who has taken his own dark journey into trying to understand why his son became the monster that he did. And he writes of this in his book. It's called A Father's Story. A lot of people would say, Mr. Dahmer, you're just trying to capitalize on the crimes of your son.
Well, money is not my prime mover at all. My main mover is to find out what went wrong and to help people. And
Could you have done
there's,
that without writing a book, though, do you think?
No.
I don't know.
No, I don't think that's a fair question. I feel like that the easy way to get your thoughts out to the world is either getting published or maybe going on a talk show. But a book would be a really good way to help people, not only like in his time, 1990s, but like later on, where people are going through the libraries and they see the book and everything, and they're like, what what kind of things can I do? And I'm sure the book probably has sold more copies now that the series Dahmer came out. I'm sure it probably sold quite a few. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I'm not sure if they're still making it. I'm sure they are. If you're going to want to warn families and parents and stuff, a book's a pretty good way to do it, in all honesty. And I don't genuinely believe the guy was trying to bank off of his son's murders. I just feel like he felt this was a good way, probably for him not to, ask questions and say help parents, but also to vent about what he's personally feeling about the situation. It helped him relax more than likely because his son was literally being put on I don't think death row, but he was definitely not death row, but he was definitely being locked up in prison for the rest of his life for murder and all this craziness. So yeah.
I've had so much interaction with people as a result of writing the book, so much feedback that I don't think I would have had if I would have just gone out on my own and tried to, and I might not have investigated so fervently and
Yourself.
in depth.
Yes, let me ask you, do you think that there are other Jeffrey Dahmers being bred out there?
Yes, I do. I think that there's always a great, our family was pretty much ordinary. I mean, I participated with Jeff in all kinds of activities. There's nothing really greatly out of the ordinary, yet something was connecting in his sexuality and his developing youth that you and I just can't even relate to. And I think that there are many more out there. We have gotten letters, as a matter of fact,
From
people who say they have these same urges.
You say ordinary, but you were an emotionally distant father, would you say?
Well,
like so many fathers, you raised, you say, even in the book you say.
By distant, I mean
that for you loving was going to work every day, providing for the family,
I, wrestled around and, goofed around with my son a lot. But to say that maybe, I don't know if I was emotionally equipped to handle
whatever was going on with him.
Yeah,
but you
right,
went fishing with
time.
him, went fishing and did all the fatherly things.
We did tennis for years. We went tobogganing, sledding, participated in 4-H. We raised lambs together, chickens in 4-H for 3 years.
Wasn't he fascinated then, though, with the innards of animals?
He never really demonstrated that to me, nor to anyone around.
I thought when you went fishing and you'd cut open the fish, he'd be all...
He did not demonstrate at that time. Actually, Oprah, all of this information came out at the trial. And at the time we were fishing, he never exhibited any type of
unusual
amazement, or his eyes didn't
when you're
widen
gutting the
or
fish.
say anything. Right. But at the trial, one of the expert witnesses, Dr. Becker, brought this out with him. And apparently he was, caught up with the color of the fish. But so in retrospect, maybe it was just an ordinary thing, but now going back to what we said before, everything is sort of foreshadowed. You think that, John?
When you were at his home, there was a time when you were at his home after he had moved to Milwaukee. I know we're skipping a lot here.
At my mother's home.
At your mother's home. And you had gone to look in a box, and he had said, don't open the box because there was, pornography in there?
I had found some pornographic material prior to that, and I thought there was pornographic material.
By this time, you know your son's a little off, though, right?
Well, I don't know. What do you mean by off? I mean, I felt
exhibiting
that
unusual behavior.
Interested in pornography, I guess, and there's probably a lot of young men that are interested. It didn't occur to me that that was greatly different.
Yeah.
In other words, I've always thought of him as being very, very shy, having feelings of inferiority, and yes, looking at pornography, perhaps.
So when you opened the box,
it didn't occur to me to be anything greatly strange.
You didn't see that there was anything to be greatly concerned about?
Well, my mother had found the box. It was unopened. It was locked. And I asked Jeff to open it. I came to her house, asked him to open it.
Thinking it was going to be pornography in there.
Right.
And he opened it, and what was there?
He resisted opening it.
Yeah.
Okay. I insisted. He got mad. He tore up the birthday check that I gave him that same day. It was his birthday.
How old was he?
And he said he was in his 20s, middle to late 20s. And He
Sounds
said,
about right,
can't I
yeah.
have just 1 square foot? That's about how big the box was, of privacy. Let's just wait till tomorrow morning. He said, I'll open it then. Because my mother was there, and he said, let's not create a scene. Let's wait till tomorrow. I'll open it then. I'll show you what's in it. It's what you think. I still went downstairs after a tool to open it. And he grabbed the box. He said, wait, please. And I acceded. I just, I felt the feelings of empathy that he was so shy and he just felt like he couldn't even have any
When you
privacy.
finally opened the box,
I didn't open the box.
Okay.
No. He brought it down the next morning, and there indeed were pornographic materials in there, which satisfied me.
Because that's what you thought was there.
Yeah, and frankly, Oprah, I don't know what I would have done if I would have opened the box, forcibly opened that box, and seen what was in there.
Because what was in there?
A human head.
When we come back, I'll ask Lionel what his son, Jeffrey Dahmer, said to him during their first conversation following his arrest.
I talk about that quite often. Like, what would have happened if Lionel actually just forced that box open right in front of Jeffrey? What would he have done? And I don't think we'll ever know what Jeffrey would have done. He said Jeffrey apparently told him that I guess the jig would have been up, but I don't really know if he would have. I don't know if he would have given up. It's really, you can never really just kind of theorize about something like that. You always just, it is what it is. It happened this way, and it just didn't, But it is a scary thought that has crossed my mind several times. If Lionel just said, nope, fuck you, grabbed the box, opened it, and saw the head, I just don't know what would have really went down in that moment.
Talking to Lionel Dahmer, we'll be talking to other parents today who raised sons who ended up committing horrible crimes against society and other people's children. Do you see your son often?
On the average, once a month.
Once a month.
Sometimes a little bit more often, depending upon the need. There's been a lot of legal problems that have come up. And
What does he say to you? What did he say to you after the arrest?
right after the arrest, the first time I saw him, he hung his head and looked very disheveled, and he said, I'm so sorry, Dad. I don't know what to say. There's nothing I can say. I did it again. So, in other words, it was just another I'm sorry. It really wasn't that much more intense than the other times when, he committed less things like lesser crimes like drunkenness and so forth.
He was drunk from the time he was 16 years old, going to school drunk?
It was somewhere in the 16, 17, 18-year range, which was completely hidden from me.
He was going to school. He was an alcoholic by the time he was 16.
It appeared to be so.
Going to school drunk every day, trying to cope with all of his fears.
And when he cracked a beer open in class on the show, yeah.
Never came
Fucking
home
hell.
drunk, never came home in a state that gave him away. Picked up liquor on the way at a friend's house. And this happened at school, drinking at school, apparently.
But by that time, he was already roaming the neighborhood streets on his bike and collecting animal remains. And
age 13, 14. It's just inconceivable. And it's also...
How was a child able to dismember animals and, take the skin off their bones? And I know you were a chemist, and he had been around you and, working with you at times, but how was he able to do that without you or your wife or your mother, anybody knowing that's what was going on?
Well, we had about 1 3/4 acres of heavily wooded property, and the adjacent properties were easy to hide
in.
And Jeff was very good at hiding.
This is your home there?
Yes. And there were so many areas that he could have done it in. And he timed it, apparently, when my former wife and I weren't around.
And that's where he killed his first victim there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That you knew nothing about?
I knew nothing about it at all. It's amazing. If only a neighbor, I knew after the fact, at the trial, I knew at that point that some of the neighbor kids knew that he was cruising around the neighborhood on a bike looking for, dead animals. That's all that they knew, apparently. But if I had known that would have been such a big red flag. I would have had him to a psychiatrist in a minute.
You think so?
I would have.
In retrospect, that would have been the flag. But
That would have been
But all the other things weren't flags.
No, not really. They were always explainable. They were always within the realm of of my experience, shyness, inferiority feelings, nothing really exceptionally stood out.
So now what does your son say to you?
Well, my wife, Sherry, and I visit him.
Your second wife?
Yes. Routinely. We talk to him every week on the phone. We're very, very close. We've gotten very close.
Do you still love your
Since
son?
his arrest, much more close.
Do you still love your son?
I still love my son. I'll always stick by him. I always have. And I still love him very, very much.
Do you see him as sick?
I think he has a very deep psychosis. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think he has something that
I can't hate the guy. I almost got brought to tears because listening to him just defend his son no matter what. It doesn't matter if he's being asked on live television, do you still love your son? Do you think he's sick? He's just like, yes, I love my son. I stuck by him. I will continue to stick by him. I do love my son. I have to respect him on that level. I do. Like, I can't, I have no sympathy for Jeffrey Dahmer. The guy can, you know my opinions. You can't fault the guy for he's not defending his son. But he's obviously not going to hate his son just because everybody else is like maybe poking at him saying you need to hate your son because he did all these terrible things. It's like that's so much easier said than done. You know, this is your blood, this is your essence. I can't help but just say I don't blame him. He's his dad. That's his father. He raised him. He was a part of his life.
he does not understand. And I would really love if he were amenable and it would not destroy him mentally. I would like to see him study. That was one of the reasons I wrote the book.
Because you'd like
to provide funds for research, for treatment of him, to donate to victims groups, to create new groups, and so forth and so on. Sherry and I discussed this extensively.
To see him studied.
Studied and helped. Right.
Do you think he can be helped?
I think if we can get back to the time where this hypothetical mixing of his sexuality with his frustrations and anger,
now,
maybe we can get to it.
Do you see anything that you or your wife at the time could have done to prevent this?
Well, there was a lot going on. There was a lot of mental, my former wife had a lot of mental and physical problems. And we were so occupied with those problems that it was difficult to concentrate on anything else.
Or to see that your child was becoming increasingly lost.
Increasingly shy, that's all that we saw. I mean, there was, I would encourage any parent, though, who has problems, and there are millions of people who have a divorce, who have marital problems, draw out information in all kinds of ways, with your minister, with your rabbi, with
because now
teachers,
you can see
whoever.
Where the trouble was breeding itself.
The psychologist that I have seen to help me through this said he didn't even know if he could ever draw out anything, to elicit anything, to show these bizarre thoughts that were developing Jeff's mind. But it's worth a trial. It's worth a checkup for any parents. Take their kids. If they're extremely shy, it doesn't mean that they have to go to a psychologist. But go for a checkup if they're not talking to anyone at all about their fears and anger and so forth.
Something's going on.
Do something.
Yeah. Very, very different interview right there than the Dr. Phil one, where she was literally, I felt like she was really trying to push to get him to, like, it almost felt like she was trying to get him to admit something. She was always asking questions about, like, well, why weren't you guys doing this, that, and this? Why is this a red flag, but not all of this stuff? And maybe her questions were fair. I mean, we're dealing with somebody like a serial killer like Jeffrey Dahmer. I felt like she was really trying to get answers out of this guy that maybe other talk show hosts didn't get answers out of. So I don't know. Let me know your guys' opinions down below. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. I will do more of these if you guys really want me to. So yeah, until next time, guys, do keep it retro, and please do take care.